Now, the House Select Committee that investigated the January 6th insurrection has released another batch of more than 40 witness interview transcripts. One indicates White House staffers drafted a press release after then Attorney General Bill Barr publicly refuted President Trump's claims that the election was rigged. It ended with anybody that thinks there wasn't massive fraud in 2020 should be fired. The statement, though, was never released, and the Attorney General was not fired. In another transcript, former Trump lawyer Sidney Powell said the numbers we saw on election night simply didn't jibe with common sense. Powell claimed that, quote, math geniuses told her Biden's victory was statistically impossible. Trump nearly appointed Powell as special counsel to investigate her baseless theories. She was eventually pushed off of his legal team. But Trump's White House counsel told the January 6th committee that it would have been a disaster if Trump had made Powell a special counsel. Now, the newly released transcripts come after the January 6th report was finally released and placed the blame squarely on former President Trump. Now, joining us now is one of the former president's attorneys, Timothy Parlatore. All right, Tim, thank you so much for joining us. Now, to be clear, the former president, he has a lot of different legal issues, but you represent him in the Justice Department's investigations into January 6th and the Mar-a-Lago investigation as well. And we really appreciate you being here. The committee has had a lot to say this week. Your clients had a lot to say this week. But let's talk a little bit about the defense strategy going forward.
Sure.
All right, earlier this week, at the beginning of the week, the committee referred your client to the Justice Department on 4 different criminal charges: obstruction of an official proceeding, conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to make a false statement, and insurrection. What is your response to that?
I mean, the referral itself is pretty much worthless. You know, the Department of Justice doesn't have to follow it. Yeah, there's been an existing investigation that we've been dealing with for quite some time. And, you know, really what this does, if anything, it just politicizes the process. You know, they've outlined a few charges here, all of which are completely legally insufficient. And so, you know, we kind of look at it as, you know, it's political noise, but it doesn't really have any effect as of right now on our defense. Where it will come in to have an effect is in looking at all the underlying documentation that the committee had, because a lot of that is going to be very helpful to us.
Well, you're absolutely correct. It is a lower bar for the committee to put forth these referrals than it is for the Justice Department to charge or ultimately prosecute. But we know here, even though these referrals are symbolic, the Justice Department is investigating this. And we also know that Special Counsel Jack Smith has requested all of the evidence that the committee has gathered and will also receive this 845-page report, which ultimately concludes that the central cause of January 6th was one man, former President Donald Trump, whom many others followed. None of the events of January 6th would have happened without him. So what is your client's defense to that conclusion?
Well, I mean, that conclusion is a little bit silly to me, because this is a committee that began as every investigator should never do. They start with a conclusion, and then they tried to build evidence that would support that. Now, ultimately, if there wasn't an election that was contested, then there wouldn't have been a rally. None of this would have happened. That is correct. But to try and place blame on somebody who specifically took steps to avoid violence and specifically told people not to be violent is a little bit disingenuous at best. You know, sorry. Well, we look at this report as, you know, really the report itself is not of much value. You know, it's written by politicians for a political purpose. The only thing that's really going to have value here is the underlying evidence, what has been included, and more importantly, what's been excluded.
Let's look at some of the evidence that they laid out in support of their conclusion, because they don't just focus on January 6th. They go all the way back before Election Day, and they argue that this plan to refute and disrupt the election results. They argue that it was, quote, premeditated. They point to emails from a conservative watchdog group between them and the White House saying that, look, just refute the election no matter what happens. They specifically point to the pressure campaign on states. They say there were over 200 contacts by the former president and his associates on states. They point to Trump's multiple contacts with the RNC chairwoman to ensure that allies were deputized to push this false elector claim. They also talk about how the former president was in touch with John Eastman when he was drafting that memo that is really at the center of his pressure campaign on the former vice president. So what evidence is it that you would have, or you believe the committee would have, to refute this roadmap that they've laid out to try to support this conclusion?
Sure. Everything that you just described, it can be seen in the light of trying to overturn an election, but it also can be seen in the light of attempting to make sure that the election results are correct. If and you have to assume for a second, he's been told that there's fraud in the election. There are certain things that show that there were inconsistencies, fraud and irregularities, and those things needed to be looked into. The people that are supposed to look into that is law enforcement, whether it be the FBI or the states specifically. So would there be pressure on states to go back and investigate to figure out whether the results are in fact accurate? Absolutely. That's what we would expect the president to do if he was presented with evidence that the results were inaccurate. So the fact that there is this contact, the fact that there are the multiple requests to investigate, that's not incriminating at all. In fact, that's something that you expect the chief executive to do because he is constitutionally required to make sure that the laws of the United States are faithfully executed. The gap that they're going to have is they're trying to make the logical leap to say he knew that the results were accurate and he was trying to push a false narrative that they were inaccurate and trying to get people to falsely flip the result. And that there's not going to be any evidence for because that's not true. And ultimately, whether there was fraud, whether that fraud was enough to overturn the election, that's something that needed to be done through an investigation, which is exactly what he was pushing for this whole time.
But the committee argues that the former president was not a, quote, passive consumer of these lies. And it appears that they sort of anticipated this defense that argued that he was listening to his attorneys. And then they presented clips of some of his top advisors who say that they told him that there was no election fraud. So how will you rebut that evidence? Because it sounds like it wasn't necessarily that he was just being told that there was election fraud. He was also being told that there was not. He even questioned some of his lawyers, for example, Sidney Powell. Hope Hicks, I believe, was the one who testified, saying that he would kind of cover the phone while she was talking and be like, look, this sounds crazy, doesn't it? It appeared that even he was skeptical of some of the advice that he was being given.
Sure. And that's the thing, is that he's being given advice by multiple people. People are telling him differing stories. Some of those people are telling him stories that they are supporting with all sorts of spreadsheets and presentations. And other people like Bill Barr are simply saying, oh, there's nothing there. We're not even going to bother investigating it. And had Bill Barr instead said, you know what, I'm going to show you that Sidney Powell is completely full of it. I'm going to send out a few FBI agents and we're going to show you. That probably would have resolved the issue. But the fact that you have some people who are saying that this is true, some people are saying that it's not true, and nobody is doing a comprehensive investigation to actually show what really happened, it's that failure and that refusal to actually go forward and conclusively prove it one way or the other, that's where the ambiguity comes in and where the questions come in.
I will note that the Attorney General, former Attorney General Bill Barr, he told the committee that he does not believe that Trump ever had any interest in what the actual facts were. But I want to move on to Jack Smith, the special counsel who's now handling these investigations.
Sure.
Have you had any interaction or communication with the special counsel directly, Mr. Smith?
Directly, no, not yet.
Now, when it comes to the January 6th investigation specifically, would you let your client, the former president, sit down with Smith's investigators for an interview? If you really believe that there's another side of this, that there's a story to tell?
Well, that's something that you have to make a decision on based on an individual basis. We're certainly not at that point in this investigation where we would even consider that. That would be something to do later on down the road. It is definitely a situation, as with all investigations, where I want to see where they go, but I also want to be active in the investigation and communicate with them and try and show them the other side. Now, does that mean have the client himself sit down, or does that mean have the attorney sit down and show other evidence, encourage them to interview other witnesses, show them other documents perhaps, and also show them problems with the evidence that they have collected thus far? That is something that we would definitely do. It's something I would try to do in any investigation, because when you have a situation like this, it's far better for the prosecutors and the defense to come together and to try and make sure that we're getting it right instead of going down a path of charging something that wouldn't be supported and then going through all of the circus of litigating that.
All right, Timothy, I've been wrapped about 5 times, but I'm going to ask you one more question really quickly
Sure.
on Mar-a-Lago. Are you confident that all the records with classified markings have now been located and turned over to the government? Because I know this has been kind of an ongoing process, handing over boxes, subpoenas, the search. Are you confident at this point on behalf of your client that everything has been located at this point?
I am. We had a professional search team go through all possible locations that reasonably could have documents, and we went through several locations that really we thought couldn't conceivably have them, but the DOJ asked us, so we did it anyway. Everything that was found has been turned over, so I'm pretty confident that that is a dead issue at this point.